generations. Got it. And have just really, been so inspired and impressed by the work you do, and really honored to be here. So obviously my name is Trevor, and I spent the last 5 years gathering stories of innovators and activists who are working to really build the foundation of a sustainable society. And the culmination of that work was this book that I published, Bright Green Future. But sometimes, I have to confess that sometimes in the environmental movement, I feel a little like a hopeless romantic. The seas are rising, the land is drying out, we've got a firestorm in one season, and then a polar vortex in the next. And that's not even talking about all of the political, economic, cultural challenges involved to actually do anything about it. But instead of tuning that all out, all of us here today are not at the end of our busy days, not necessarily just watching TV, but we're actually in meetings like this, staring straight into the heart of this seemingly hopeless situation. And I think that's beautiful, because we're determined to fix this mess. And I feel we believe that not only can we stop the destruction of our planet, but at the same time create a better world than the one we live in now. To people outside the environmental movement, this might seem like idealism, but I believe that we actually have a secret that makes our dreams much more realistic than they may appear. Our secret is that we think differently. The way we conceptualize a crisis often defines how we respond to it. And so I would like to ask all of you here a question, to learn from your wisdom and experience as environmental advocates and climate activists, and to better understand the way that you view the future. And so my question to you all is, in thinking about how we envision a sustainable society, this, really the future of our dreams, really begins with the way we think. And so my question to you all is, what types of thinking do you feel we need to break free from our fossil-fueled economy and envision a truly sustainable society? So you can either put your thoughts into the chat, or feel free to raise your hand if you wanted to share, just speaking into the meeting.
And while folks are thinking about this, I'm just going to let people know one more time that we're having this strange issue with the naming. You can either go into the participants list and find your name and go to more, scroll down to rename and put your name in, or hover over your own picture in the right-hand corner. There's a drop down, and if you're not able to do that, send me a message with your name and I will try to rename you.
Cool. Thanks, Carol. Yeah.
And try to turn your video on, everyone, so that will help too.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. Anyone have any thoughts, initial reactions to this question?
I do.
Go for it.
Okay. I've been thinking about this a lot. Two things come to mind. First of all, we need to get our legislators to stop creating agencies and governmental departments that depend on take. In other words, depend on killing our trees, killing our animals, etc. And we need to start letting them think about how else we can use our amazing resources to do other things. In other words, to develop their tax structure around something besides take. And I think we can do that. And I would love to hear other people's ideas on this, like areas for people to go snowshoeing. And yeah, you have to buy a pass to do it, but that keeps Fish and Game going, okay? The other thing that I have been looking into is all the alternatives that we need to have, for instance, for wood or wood products, like much more bamboo, use of bamboo, if we can do it sustainably, and hemp fiber that we can do sustainably, that can be used for clothing, can be used for wood products, etc. So I am so excited to have you here today and to hear about other ideas. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Sue. I like that first part a lot that you said around how we think about our agencies are set up and like what their charge is. Is it around like facilitating the extraction of resources and providing tax dollars that are going into basically making that easier, or is it focused on stewardship of the land, conservation, and regeneration? And really, I like that idea of like what's in the DNA of our agencies. So thanks for bringing that up. Any other people want to jump in on just chatting in, or I'm at the end, I'm going to go through the questions the observations and thoughts people put into the chat. Okay, I'm going to go through these. So Rebecca Hansen says, all the people who have ideas about changing the future able to talk together in small groups and sharing ideas. Yeah, I really like this one. I think like being able to, like, a good first step really is having a forum and an outlet to talk about like what are the needs in our community, what are the strengths in our community, and what is our creative potential to build a sustainable future together. And so yeah, I really like that idea of like kind of small group forums where people can express their creativity and knowledge. We have one of the Carol Valentines says, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word plus visualizing the desired manifestation of the new earth. The Lord's Prayer made manifest. That sounds really interesting. I'd love if you wanted to elaborate on that a little. What you meant by that.
And could everyone please turn their video on? And whoever is that Carol Valentine, we can rename you if we know who's speaking. So
yeah, I'm curious what you mean by the manifestation of the new earth.
okay, someone's not speaking up, so.
Oh, good. Yeah, definitely interesting. I don't know if this is like a religious or a scripture perspective on how we steward the planet. And there's definitely a lot of thought around the intersection between theology and religion and stewardship of the earth and conservation and sustainability. So it is really cool to see those connections of seeing how a lot of the what we see as like technological changes and cultural changes that have to happen in today's modern world, that definitely their basis can be found often in scripture. So that was an interesting comment. All right, from Craig Mackey, we see a compassionate and loving attitude towards ourselves, the people around us, and the environment we live in. I really like that. Yeah, like spreading compassion as the energy that we put into the world, to all beings, and to the systems that support us, and the people around us, and spreading that. I think that's a really good starting point. From another one of the Carol Valentines, we have, quote unquote, society is too large a concept slash goal. That's also a good point. Yeah, I mean, society can mean many different things. I chose that word because for that exact reason, because it encompasses so much, that it can definitely inspire many different answers to this particular question, and how we think about relating to society as, you know, either a political system, a system of cultural values, our economic system, or even just like the neighborhood we live in. So I appreciate that comment. But yeah, I meant it in a as broad a sense as we can possibly imagine. Rick Nuno, yes, you raised your hand. Go for it.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I just thought I wanted to jump in here. The thought that came to my mind was to achieve a cooperative way of thinking, because anything that we do is going to have to be done in tandem with other people, other groups. It's definitely something that no one person can solve on their own. And so it's going to require a very strong sense of cooperation. That's just my sense for how to approach the problem.
Yeah, no, I love that too. Thinking of like beneficiaries as not being solely like individualistic, and like the only benefit being ones that can accrue to individuals, and being like what is the benefit from a community perspective? What does participation look like when we're engaged in a community perspective, and like how is that also rewarding to people engaged in that? Because communities can be an extremely rewarding experience in themselves, like beyond like any material benefits we get, is kind of existing in that. And I think local groups like Sierra Club really embody that ability to feel that connection around being in a community working on something together. Gretchen says, thinking about what is beneficial for the entire community of people, animals, plants, not just the ownership class. Nice. I like how these two go together well. Yeah, really thinking beyond like from individual benefit to individual species benefit of moving beyond just thinking like, okay, how can the world we set up not solely be human-centric or anthropocentric, and be oriented towards all of these ecosystems and other species that that enrich our lives by being here from a selfish perspective, but from a selfless perspective. We're obviously here first, and the world has been had developed really complex and really intricate ecosystems that are worth preserving on their own, and not solely from like an ownership perspective of like, this has X amount of value to me as a human. So thank you for that. Another Carol Valentine says, I feel optimistic if I think in terms of those portions of the world / countries / societies that might be able to embrace our progressive sustainable. So I think you mean that you're optimistic when we have more progressive policies, or progressive in terms of like going deeper on the definition of what sustainable means, like beyond like, you know, just having corporations be more sustainable, to like thinking deeper about like, what does deep sustainability look like? yeah, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on that at all.
And could you let us know your name, please? And I will try to rename you from my end. The mystery Carol Valentine, who shared
No
about
worries. Yeah,
feeling
we
most
can move on, and
optimistic.
feel free to jump in if you want to later. We are stewards, not owners. I really like that too. Thinking of stewardship, not like solely like domination and like complete ownership over nature and things, but stewardship and like being part of a larger whole, not like dominating a larger whole. Carol Valentine, the real Carol Valentine, says, think about how to live in small community groups like villages to be able to withstand the collapse of capitalist global extractive economy. Learn skills to live off the local land base. Yeah, that's great. Taking it in a different direction around like we need to do some preparing for when things get worse. Like how are we going to have things in our local community that support us and sustain us outside of this larger global system that we're very, very reliant on of global commerce. So yeah, how do we move in towards a more regenerative local setup is really, really important for local resilience. I'm just going to go through a couple more and then jump into the presentation. Yes, Rebecca Hansen. Yes, stewards, not owners. Difficulty of human, quality of greed, lack of sharing. Yep, completely agree with that. Tom Beach, both the promise of facing the climate crisis and the forces lined up against us involve human behavior. Climate change is a people/social problem more than it is a carbon problem. How do we get everyday folks to recognize the challenge? Yeah, I like how you put that. Climate change is a social problem, even though we have a ton of science on what's going on and what could possibly, variety of different things that could possibly happen. But really, in order to solve it, it is a cultural thing, because we've built a culture around carbon. And so in order to decarbonize, there's a certain amount of cultural rethinking that has to happen. Thank you. So I'm going to move into the presentation. Sorry I didn't get to all of these different comments. It seems like there's a lot of really good and really thoughtful people here. So thank you so much for sharing all of that and your wisdom. I'm out of the people I interviewed, I probably interviewed about probably a little over 200 people who are working on really creating this sustainable society. And out of those conversations, I noticed some common threads in the way that they approached solutioning and the way they viewed the different challenges and problems they faced. And I saw these kind of three common threads emerge. And so I wanted to share these with you to add to your repertoire of sustainable design thinking, and then also include some specific examples of how they've kind of different change makers have acted on these different types of thinking. So really, and some of these you already mentioned parts of, these three kind of common threads of ways of thinking include, first up, systemic thinking, which is really all about finding the deeper patterns that are hiding in plain sight. It's looking beyond the surface to try to find what's going on in all of the interlocking and intersecting web of our globally connected world, and even our local world and how that connects with that. Secondly is community thinking, which is really all about embracing local people as the beneficiaries of change. I mean, we know we have to make fairly drastic changes in order to decarbonize our world and have a better relationship with the planet. And it's important that we're also thinking about how that change can benefit people at a local level, and is kind of adaptive to local needs and strengths, as we pursue different strategies for change. Thirdly is regeneration thinking, which is really all about creating both systems and communities that grow stronger and healthier over time, that rather than deteriorate with each system, with each season and each passing year, become more resilient to respond to different crises that come up, as well as better able to benefit from different opportunities that present themselves. So we'll start first with systems thinking. Essentially, systems thinking is all about interconnectedness and how different patterns and processes interlap and intersect rather than solely being disconnected. It's about thinking about things as circular rather than linear, where point A doesn't necessarily end at point B, but starts another cycle. It's about thinking of multiple things emerging at once rather than as separate in silos. And it's also about looking at the whole rather than solely the parts on their own. I wanted to share a story with you all, which I think it illustrates the difference between a traditional reductionist approach and a systems approach. I like to call this story the parable of the techie and the farmer, because it occurred during a conversation I had with a tech startup entrepreneur who I met in San Francisco. And during this conversation, we were talking about sustainability and climate change and all of these different things related to this future of our planet. And one point that he made really was that he said that regenerative organic farming, or really any focus on farming that tries to sequester carbon in the soil, is essentially pointless. He said there's really no reason we should focus on that, because if we really wanted to capture carbon, we could capture way more carbon by putting a giant direct air capture machine on that land that would have had a regenerative organic farm. And we could, sequester, X times more carbon than we could in any amount of soil and with any amount of farming practices. And from a kind of a reductionist traditional thinking approach, that makes sense. Like, you very well may be able to sequester a lot more carbon doing that. But you also applied from a systems perspective, you see that the only benefit of a carbon capture machine is capturing carbon. With a regenerative organic farm, not only can you capture carbon in the soil and sequester it, but also grow healthy food, hold water better during times of drought, absorb more water during floods, providing almost like water management and flood protection, as well as provide a space for people to connect with the food system that sustains us and go closer to the actual, like, the actual things that's supporting us and keeping us alive, and have a little less distance between the earth and what allows us to exist on it. And if we take a step back, we really see that we've designed a lot of our world using this traditional reductionist approach. If we look at the patterns of how we design cities as well as farms, they essentially resemble a monoculture in a few different ways. When we design a city, we focus on oftentimes maximizing residential and housing in one area. We focus on maximizing commerce through big shopping malls and shopping centers in one area. And then we focus on things that are made and created in a separate space. And we do that do the same thing when we think about growing food that supports our cities. We think about maximizing corn in one area, wheat in another area, soybeans, and then livestock completely separate. And while that system is very good at maximizing certain metrics, if you're solely looking at it from that perspective, they end up sacrificing the benefits that come from intermixing different things and looking at it from a whole, looking at it more holistically. We sat on farms, we sacrifice the benefits to the soil by solely growing one thing on one piece of land. In cities, we sacrifice the benefits of a diverse and walkable neighborhood by separating everything with separate uses. And so what does it look like when we do take a more systems approach to designing these two things? This is just one example in a town called Gilbert, Arizona, where they have built a residential neighborhood that's a mixed-use residential neighborhood around a regenerative organic farm. And so rather than solely just building a new residential subdivision, which had been the plan when a series of developers bought out this family farm, they decided instead to keep some of that farming element and try to preserve some of that original sense of community that exists in small towns before more modern development. And so they kept a small portion of farm there where residents can access the fresh produce and also learn how to grow food. They converted an old shed on the property that used to hold tractors and other farm equipment into a maker space for people to start new businesses, as well as like have a place to sell their stuff. There's a couple breweries in there. There's different craft makers and co-working space. Then they also converted the old farmhouse into a restaurant. They built a coffee shop, a number of other different shops, with that focus of creating a destination in the place where people could walk to all the things that they needed, as well as have a connection to the land that sustains them. This is obviously just like one example in suburbia, so it's obviously not a panacea, but it's interesting how they kind of combine both elements and at the same time created something that was better than the sum of its parts, where people come here from the surrounding areas to visit the local craft makers and brewery, to eat at the restaurant. And the farm also hosts an event space and wedding venue, in addition to kind of growing local food for the surrounding community. And also they did a better job of trying to mix different residential uses through different parts of people's lives, rather than building just single family homes. Mix a number of different like multifamily apartments with single family homes, a senior living facility, a school, to try to mix all of these different phases in our lives, rather than just having this is a neighborhood for families, this is a neighborhood for young people out of college, this is a neighborhood for people towards the end of their lives. And secondly, we think about community thinking, which is really all about shifting the benefits of change to community. In the traditional in our fossil fueled economy, while we of course benefit from driving and from electricity produced by fossil fuels for now, the main beneficiaries of that economy of the revenue generated from it have largely been the fossil fuel companies or utilities. That is kind of almost a very small group of people are really benefiting from these practices that are destroying the planet. As we shift to renewables, we're starting to see a number of new models come about that widens the pool of beneficiaries, that seeks to distribute some of the revenue as well as benefits that come from having a renewable resource in your area. So one example in California is, I don't know if Oregon has experimented with this at all, but we have community choice organizations, which essentially allow cities and counties to basically choose where their energy comes from. So they can choose, okay, we want to have X amount of wind and solar that are powering our ratepayers in this area, and also decide how we want to spend the excess revenue that's generated from doing these different from providing that energy. And so those benefits can be in community projects either through resiliency projects or other kind of community development projects, through maybe giving that money actually back as a dividend to ratepayers to make electricity more and energy more affordable. In some cases, they ended up reducing the cost of what people pay for energy up to 30% compared to the utility. And while this started in really one county, it's grown to incorporate half of the ratepayers for electricity throughout the state. And there's over 20 different community choice organizations that each kind of have their own local focus. And you can actually walk into like an executive board meeting of one of these community choice organizations, which I've actually done, and go up and voice, like, say what you want, how you want your energy to be, what kind of energy you want to source, as well as how you want the money to be spent from it, that's generated from producing it. Community thinking is also a lot of that is really about adapting solutions to local needs and visions. So this is an organization in Appalachia in West Virginia called Coalfield Development. And what they do is they train laid off coal miners to do it in a number of different skills, including in a really cool case, transforming surface mines into food forests. And so many parts throughout Appalachia, they have either old mountains or areas that were blasted apart to extract coal that are really just kind of sitting there right now, which they basically take a stone crusher machine and break up the rock into finer particles, as well as using pickaxes and then a combination of pigs and different crops to really grow soil on top of that old land, and use it to generate income through and build new skills in farming through these different regenerative farms that they've created. They've created a number of different local enterprises too, through like social enterprises, including a solar company, including a construction company that builds affordable housing. They also acquired a t-shirt company that makes t-shirts for Major League Baseball out of recycled materials. And everyone enrolled in this, everyone who's working for Coalfield Development receives a number of different skills training, including a free paid tuition to a free associate's degree, as well as different counseling and other things to really build the foundation for a more diverse economy in a place that had been beholden to really just one resource, being coal. And their founder says it's not really wise to put all of our eggs in one basket, and really relying on just like this one thing that, as it collapses, creates really leaves a hole in the economy. So they're trying to start the foundations of a new renewable based economy that is more diversified at the same time. And they also draw upon really the local values of Appalachia, and including what they refer to as gumption, grit, and grace, which they see as really like these Appalachian values, which have enabled people to survive and make a living in the mountains and in like hard country. These values are important for the sustainable society we want to create, and being able to make things really well, and sustain support ourselves and have some self-reliance, as well as like a connection to community around that. And so there's really kind of all of this wisdom and knowledge that they're drawing on, which is based on kind of local local visions, as well as their kind of local values are incorporated into this change. This is another example on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota of an organization known as Thunder Valley Community Development Corporation. And what they did is they started it was started by a number of different indigenous activists within the Lakota community on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And they looked at a number of different challenges that people in their community were facing. Very high unemployment, sometimes up to 70%, lack of access to healthy food, as well as a housing shortage, especially for young people. In many cases, people were living in trailer homes with an average of 15 people living in a home. And so they held many different meetings with people in the community about what their vision for the future looked like. And people said, we don't want to really be just putting a Band-Aid on things. We want systemic change. We want an actual vision for what a better future might look like. And so they took all of these different challenges that we were facing and also combined them with their local strengths to create what they call a indigenous regenerative community, which trains youth in construction to build new housing, as well as build a farm, and a farm which provides healthy food to people in the community, including like a lot of different eggs and healthy veggies and produce, and also provides extra housing. They hope to have as many as 900 people living there to address that housing shortage that they're facing. And in a couple of cases, I heard that people who got a job working and building the houses ended up becoming like first-time homeowners in some cases for some of the houses that they were trying to position that way. For the houses that they'd actually built through it. But they also provide a number of different housing, like co-op living and other solutions there too, for many different housing needs. And the whole thing is powered by solar and renewable energy, and everything is built to be very energy efficient too. And in addition, they built a community center there that provides a number of different skills classes, as well as cultural revitalization, including Lakota language classes, and a number of different other really cool cultural events that are hosted in that community center. And so that's really an example of how places combine both community thinking and systemic thinking to create kind of this multi factor approach to solving many different, addressing many different needs at the same time. And so lastly, we get to regeneration thinking. Regeneration, often first we think a lot of it about regenerating land. And this is an example in Minnesota of an organization known as Regen Ag Alliance. And it was started by someone named Reginaldo Hazlet Marroquin, who grew up in Guatemala and was really inspired by how rainforests provide food effortlessly for so many different species. And he took that knowledge, in addition to studying on a number of different farming techniques, and developed what he sees as a replicable small-scale permaculture system that he uses to train migrant farm workers to start their own farms. And something like over 70% of farm laborers in our country are migrant farm workers, and so he really wants to provide a way for them to access some of the benefits from actually having your own farming initiative. And so he developed a system that combines both both chickens with fruit trees and nut trees, and grains and veggies, that is really focused on integrating like the benefits of all of those different things together, so that he often refers to all of the chicken manure and the leaf litter and everything as recharging the battery of the soil, so that each year, rather than having to put more inputs into the soil in order to grow things, that each year in each season the system starts off stronger. And so you end up using less inputs, and you can produce more food at a lower cost, generating more income while also having a really good impact on the planet, or at least that piece of land that you're stewarding in a more responsible way than a monoculture farm. We can also think about regeneration in terms of materials. So this is a startup out of British Columbia called Ronin 8 that looked at the e-waste challenge that we have. Within our electronics, we have all of these often toxic and exotic materials that often end up in developing countries because we haven't prioritized ways to deal with them, and so they end up polluting different neighborhoods throughout the developing world. And what Ronin 8 did was they developed a way, a non-toxic way that uses this technology, which is based on sound energy. They take basically this massive tuning fork, they grind up our old electronics with water in order to prevent any toxic dust from getting out. And then they use sound energy and vibrations to separate the fiberglass from the metals, and then all the metals from themselves, the copper, the tin, the silver, the lead, the gold, the palladium, all of the rare earth metals, rare earth elements that often end up getting thrown away, that never end up seeing the next cycle. And really, it's like if we have this economy that's based off of producing the next big gadget that works for like the next year to 6 months, but we haven't really thought about what the material cycle for that product cycle looks like. That material cycle is really a one-way ticket to the dump. Rather, we should be thinking about it. They say in different cycles of the copper cycle, the tin cycle, the gold cycle, the lead cycle. All these different cycles should be part of that if we really set up our economy in that way. Obviously we could have a whole other conversation about why are we buying the next gadget, which I also think is maybe often incredibly valid at the same time. But I guess they're focused on like, how do we look at this existing system that's based on constantly having a new thing. And then lastly, regeneration can be thought of as regenerating people and regenerating our communities and our confidence. This is a farm out of upstate New York known as Soulfire Farm that empowers Black and Indigenous farmers to regenerate their land and also their own communities through training in permaculture skills, as well as construction and a number of other like educational skills to improve access to both healthy food as well as connection to nature and a connection to the land throughout communities across the country. And it's really like a kind of a training trainers to really expanding this sense of community sustainability and regeneration across the country, and then beyond with partnerships with people in other countries. And yeah, so that's the end of my presentation. If you want to get more inspiration, these stories and others are in my book, Bright Green Future. If you go to brightgreenfuture.com and use promo code Sierra, you can get 15% off the book. And these are for signed copies. And so I'm very happy to sign a copy of the book for you and write a little note as well. And obviously, there's also an ebook version available if you prefer that. That's available on Amazon. But then also, if you want to just get in touch, share your thoughts, feedback, collaboration ideas, anything else, I would, love to hear from you. You can reach me at trevor@brightgreenfuture.com. So thank you all so much for everything there. And for having me today and all your great comments and great contributions. If I know we only have a few minutes left, but if anyone has any last questions, feel free to any reactions, feel free to go ahead and let me know.
I would like to just ask people who are still named Carol Valentine. Actually, if everyone could please just take a moment right now and type your name as you registered into the chat, then we will be able to make sure we get you the recording of this wonderful presentation and the follow-up materials. If you could take a moment to do that, much appreciated. Did anyone have a last comment or question for Trevor?
Well, I'll jump in. I just want to say how inspired I was by these stories. It is so easy to get discouraged by doing this kind of work. And I love the optimism you bring to it. And I love the opportunity with these kind of connections that you've gifted us to have stories to share with people in my circle. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dorothy. That's really kind of you. Yeah, I think that it is really important with all of the huge challenges we face. It's really important to have some tangible examples of how people are actually creating something beautiful. Let's see. I see Bill says something about how can we address sustainability without addressing issues related to population growth. Yeah, I mean that's a really good point. Like we are the impact of each additional person in the world does have a profound effect on the planet, especially coming from in the developed world that's so much more outsized. Yeah, I don't address that specific issue in the book related to population. And I think that is a really huge question about like how, like, what does it look like for our population to flatten and to not be so large? And what, like, but also like, because our population is probably going to continue growing, unfortunately, what does that look like to be able to provide for ourselves and not destroy the planet with a world that, you know, I guess you could say is overpopulating. But that's a really big that's a really big question. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that. It's kind of a hard thing to say, like there's a solution for that.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in and just say there's been some controversy within the Sierra Club around this topic because it does touch on that there have been some movements within the Sierra Club that really had some racist undertones related to overpopulation. And so it's been a delicate issue, but I think it's a really important issue to have some discussions around, you know, in a safe space and positive way. So I just invite you all to keep engaging, and we can have some forums where we talk about all kinds of things. Um, and the question came up. Let's see. Rebecca asked, does the book contain more stories like what you talked about today?
Yep,
And
it does. Yeah.
it does.
So
It's a great book. I really enjoyed reading this book, and it is very inspiring to get a window on all these different things happening.
mhm. Yeah, it's divided into energy industry, cities, and farms, and so there's a number of different stories kind of addressing these various aspects that relate to our impact on the planet. Uh, but yeah, thank you all so much. This has been wonderful. I am just I'm really honored to be here and to be surrounded by so many amazing Carol Valentines, eh, as well as other folks. And so yeah, I will probably wrap this up with all the time we have. But yeah, again, if you want to get in touch, my door is always open. Even if you want to give me feedback on anything, I'm always open and to any feedback or collaboration ideas or just to chat. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you so much, Trevor. Um, really appreciate you spending this time sharing this information, and thanks to everybody who shared your ideas, and we'll keep in touch. Take care, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
you,
Thanks for
Tom.
organizing this.
Bye.
That was fun.
Mhm.
And this looks like
Also,
Deborah. Are you here, Deborah?
I am. Am I late?
Yes. We were
Uh-oh.
from 6 to 7.
Oh, shoot.
yeah,
I'm
sorry.
so sorry your time was not, that you didn't have the time.
Oops.
Correct.
Well,
And
you
I
recorded
wondered,
it, though.
because I thought you, yes, we did. And I will stop recording actually.